Lord energies are always under His control. The Lord never becomes controlled by His energies. The living entity is forced to take birth in this material world in some circumstance which is beyond His control. A particular family, in a particular country, the living entity takes birth, either as a human being or an animal or a bird. None of these things are in the control of the living entity. He's forced by the Daivi Prakriti, by the material nature, to take birth in some circumstance. But the Supreme Lord, He's not like that. Whenever He appears in this world, He does so out of His own sweet will, in any form He may choose. We recently celebrated the appearance day of Lord Braha. Right? So the Lord appeared in the form of a boar and performed His pastimes of lifting the earth out of the muck from the lower planetary systems and placing the earth in its proper orbit. So the Lord and the living entity, although they are immortal, simultaneously the Lord is never controlled by the material energy. He always remains the controller of the material energy, and the living entities are known as Tatastha Shakti. That means sometimes they're controlled and sometimes they are under the control of the material energy, and sometimes they're under control of the Lord's internal energy. So the conclusion of the impersonalists or Mayavads that we're all God, and that by some process we can understand that we're God, this is false understanding. It's explained without a proper knowledge. It's a poor fund of knowledge, Srila Prabhupada explains, because the Lord is, if the living entity is God, then how is it that the living entity becomes controlled by the material energy? God is always God. God never becomes God. So the prevalent philosophy, many times you hear it, one after another, they come forward and they explain that we're all God. You're God, I'm God, everybody's God. And that if you take one mantra from me, you can realize that you're God. Why should God need a mantra to realize that He's God? God is always God. Doesn't God, Prabhupada says, doesn't become God. He's always controls the material energy. He's never controlled by the material energy. If the living entity is God and becomes controlled by Maya, that means that Maya is more powerful than God. And this is why we call it Mayavad, right? That the ultimate truth is Maya. Lord Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that I am the ultimate truth. Mata parantaram nanyat kantidasti jananjaya. That there's no truth higher than me, Krishna says. So, do we accept the words of Krishna, or do we accept the words of the so-called transcendentalist? We accept the words of Krishna. We accept what Krishna says, that there's no truth higher than Him. Mayadhyakshena prakriti, that the material nature, this prakriti, works under His direction. And that's being established here by Srila Prabhupada. An analogy will help us to understand the distinction between ourselves and God. From the ground, we may see only clouds in the sky. But if we fly above the clouds, we can see the sun shining. From the sky, skyscrapers and cities may seem very tiny. Similarly, from God's position, this entire material creation is insignificant. The tendency of the living entity is to come down from the heights where everything can be seen in perspective. God, however, does not have this tendency. The Supreme Lord is not subject to fall down into illusion, Maya, any more than the sun is subject to fall beneath the clouds. Impersonalist philosophers, Mayavadis, maintain that both the living entity and God himself are under the control of Maya when they come into this material world. This is the fallacy of this philosophy. So their understanding is that when Krishna came to the material world, he was under the control of the material energy, but that by his process he became self-realized, to understood that he's God. But we reject this. Krishna is God, always was God, always will be God. Right? He controls the material energy, and he's not controlled by the material energy. So this understanding of the Mayavadis, or the impersonalists, is rejected. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu specifically came, and many acharyas, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, they established that God is God, always God, and the living entity is always subordinate to God. Krishna explains that the living entities are always his angsa, always his parts and parcels, right? We're part of God, in that God is eternal and we are eternal. God is full of knowledge, the living entity is full of knowledge, and in his liberated state, the living entity is also blissful. And the Supreme Lord is blissful. But we are very small, minute as living entities, and God is very great. Just like if you have a drop of water from the samudra, from the ocean, it's salty. The same constitution as the whole ocean. Right? But the drop is very insignificant compared to the whole ocean. Right? Even if you have a glass of water, still, what is that compared to the whole ocean? So this is the proper understanding of our position as subordinate to God. And this is being explained here by Srila Prabhupada. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu should therefore not be considered one of us. He is Krishna himself, the supreme living entity, and as such he never comes under the cloud of Maya. So this is a test of our faith, right? One may accept that Krishna is God, right? But we also have to understand that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, right? And this makes us very much unique in the sense that we're following simultaneously Lord Sri Krishna and his instructions from Bhagavad Gita, and at the same time we're following his Yuga avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is non-different from Krishna. There may be persons that know about Lord Chaitanya, but they don't accept that he's God. They think that he's some great personality, and that through he became God, some may think, right? But no. Always was, is, and will be the Supreme. His expansions, and even his higher devotees, never fall down into the clutches of Maya. Lord Chaitanya came to earth simply to preach Krishna Bhakti, love of Krishna. In other words, he is Lord Krishna himself, teaching the living entities the proper way to approach Krishna. He's like a teacher who, seeing a student doing poorly, takes up a pencil and writes saying, "Do it like this, A, B, C." Actually, there's a photograph of Srila Prabhupada teaching one Gurukul kid. You know who that Gurukul kid was? Dwarkadish, yeah. Labanga Latika's son. Right? She was here in Bombay for some time. And then she moved over to Alibag side. She had a farm. She was living there with her husband. But her son, Dwarkadish. So Srila Prabhupada is showing him how to write the Sanskrit letters, instructing him. From this, one should not foolishly think that the teacher is learning the ABCs. Similarly, although Lord Chaitanya appears in the guise of a devotee, we should not foolishly think that he's an ordinary human being. We should always remember that Lord Chaitanya is Krishna, God himself, teaching us how to become Krishna conscious, and we must study him in that light. In the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 66, Lord Krishna says, "Give up your nonsense and surrender unto me, I will protect you." We say, "Oh, surrender? But I have so many responsibilities." And Maya, illusion, says to us, "Don't do it, or you'll be out of my clutches. Just stay in my clutches, and I'll kick you." Right? Maya. Maya is so powerful. So much prabhav. Right? Every moment we're getting kicks, but we're thinking, "Oh, I have so many things to do," and it is a fact that we're constantly being kicked by Maya. But as the male ass is kicked in the face by the she-ass when he comes for sex, similarly cats and dogs are always fighting and whining when they have sex. Even an elephant in the jungle is caught by the use of a trained she-elephant who leads him into a pit. Right? Prabhupada explains that the huge elephant, how he's caught. They dig a big pit, right? On the other side they put a she-elephant, and so when the male goes to get the she-elephant, he falls down in the pit and he's caught. Right? Otherwise, how can you catch an elephant, right? You're not going to throw a rope around his neck or something, right? Like you can a horse. Caught. We should learn by observing these tricks of nature. So, some people might say, well, Srila Prabhupada's against women because he's speaking like this against women. No. This is the material nature. This is the way life is, right? This attraction between male and female It's the binding force. When there's a jail, they have the jail keeper and bars on the windows, and if the prisoner is out of control, they put him in solitary confinement, right? So in this material world, it's like a jail, but we don't have bars on the windows. We don't have solitary confinement. We just got the attraction between male and female to keep us here in the material world. Right? That is the bars on the window. So in modern world, they may seem like this is, speaking out like this is, hatred of women or something like that. Right? But that's not the case. It's the absolute truth. And either you accept the absolute truth or you accept the relative truths of this material world. And there's so many and they're always changing. Right? They talk about women's liberation. Okay, women should be liberated. Then they talk about gay liberation. Homosexuals should be liberated. Right? Transsexuals should be liberated. Right? What is that liberation? Their idea is that you should accept all these things as any way that they dictate, right? Some people change their sex in Western society. Men become women, right? So they should be allowed to use the women's bathroom because they were men. Now, they create a big confusion. Big confusion. Right? We accept the words of the acharyas. Finally. Right? We say that Maya kicks. What is that Maya? That Maya is the idea that I can enjoy separately from Krishna. Right? And if you have that idea, whatever it is, whether it's homosex or transsexual or whatever kind of sex, you're going to get kicked. Nicely kicked. That's what it means to have faith. To have faith. And everybody has faith. Nobody can, they may say, well, you just have faith. Yes, we have faith. But everybody has faith. Show me who doesn't have faith. When you get out of the house in Bombay and pack yourself in the train, you have faith that somehow or another you'll survive that experience. But every day, so many people die. They fall out of the train, they get pushed out of the train, they're hanging on the outside and they get hit by a pole. Every day, without fail. They don't report it like they report the corona deaths. They should have also in the newspaper, okay, today so many people rode in the train and so many people died in the train. Fell out, pushed off, thrown off the platform, so many things. Right? But they have faith. When I get out, I get in my car, and everybody's going to keep to the left. In America, they keep to the right. But in this country, and in England, they keep to the left, right? So if you didn't have faith that everybody's going to keep to the left, you wouldn't even get in your car. You wouldn't go anywhere, right? But because you have faith that the other people are going to follow the rules and you're also going to follow the rules, so you get in your car and you try to drive downtown. So people have faith. It's where they choose to place their faith. Right? In the material world, they say that you can enjoy. Look at all the advertisements. All the advertisements that are there in the social media, right? You can enjoy. Get an apartment in Tana. It's heaven. Hare? An apartment in Dharavi is not heaven, but an apartment in Tana is heaven. Apartment should be apartment. So they can, manipulate the material energy and fool people into thinking that just by this way you'll enjoy. If you want to ride in a vehicle, what does a vehicle do? It takes you from point A to point B. And previously, people used to go from point A to point B in this country by bullock cart, Belgadi. Huh? Did people get where they used to want to go? They got where they wanted to go. Prabhupada talks about the best way to come from Mayapur to Calcutta. The best way, right? In the old days, they took a Belgadi, threw a mattress in the back of the Belgadi, started in the night to go to Calcutta, sleep in the back of the Belgadi, and in the morning you were in Calcutta. They got there, right? Now people think because they drive at breakneck speeds. One time I was going from Calcutta to Mayapur early in the morning. I think I was with Bhakti Chuswami, I'm not sure. But we killed 3 dogs that ran out in front of the car. And this they call advancement. But all it is getting from one place to another. So you can get from one place to another in a wagon-R, but someone else thinks, no, I'll have a Mercedes-Benz from Calcutta to Mayapur. And they think that is advancement of life. But it's just going from one place to another. But by the influence of Maya, or illusion, one is thinking they're advanced, more advanced than someone else. Right? Maya has many ways to entrap us, and her strongest shackle is the female. Women's Liberation Party, they're just shouting. How can Prabhupada say that? How can he say that? It's against the women. There's a fancy word for it. I can't even think of it. A Maya Shoguness, or someone who hates women, right? They say like that, huh? Say loud? No, male chauvinism, no, but there's another word. It's a real 50-cent word. I forget. Huh? Woman hater, yeah. It's M-Y-G-O, anyway, I can't even pronounce it. It's a big long word. What? There you go. Say it again. Misogynist. Misogynist, right? A woman hater. So when the feminists read this statement, they think, oh, Prabhupada is a woman hater. Oh yeah. Maya has many ways to entrap us, and the strongest shackle is the female. Prabhupada's a misogynist. Rascals. One so-called devotee, no, I don't distribute Prabhupada's books anymore because, Prabhupada is misogynist. Bless him. What's going on? No, he's the teller of the absolute truth, but you don't like the absolute truth. You don't like to hear it. And there's nothing wrong with women. See the ladies that were under the shelter of Srila Prabhupada, Kaushalya, and so many other ladies. They report how Prabhupada gave them so much shelter, so much importance, right? One time he went to this Amritsar and did a program there. So there was a whole bunch of Mayavadi sannyasis, right? And he had Koshalya go up and preach, right? So she preached, what she did was she had memorized all the mantras from the Ishopanishad. And she recited, the Mayavadis are very attracted by the Upanishads, because in the Upanishads there's statements like, the Lord has no eyes, the Lord has, so they say that from this God's impersonal, no legs, no arms. But the real explanation is he has no material eyes, no material legs, no material arms, they're all spiritual. Right? But they take it to mean he's nirakar, nirgun. Right? But anyway, she read through the whole, she recited by heart all the mantras, 18 mantras from Ishopanishad. And they were very amazed. They're amazed anyway because they're foreigners, right? Second, because she was a lady, right? And Prabhupada told those Mayavadi sannyasis that this lady has more bhakti in her little finger than you have in your whole body. Right? So the daughters, spiritual daughters of Srila Prabhupada felt very protected. But the influence of Maya is so powerful, now they're saying women hater. Of course, in actuality, we are neither male nor female, for these designations refer only to the outer dress, the body. We're all actually Krishna's servants. But in conditioned life, we are shackled by iron chains in the form of beautiful women. Thus, every male is bound by sex, and therefore one who wishes to gain liberation from the material clutches must first learn to control the sex urge. Unrestricted sex puts one fully in the clutches of illusion. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu officially renounced this illusion at the age of 24, although his wife was 16 and his mother 70, and he was the only male in the family. Although he was a Brahmana and was not rich, he took sannyas, the renounced order of life, and thus extricated himself from the family entanglement. If we wish to become fully Krishna conscious, we have to give up the shackles of Maya. Or, if we remain with Maya, we should live in such a way that we'll not be subject to illusion, as did the many householders among Lord Chaitanya's closest devotees. With his followers in the renounced order, however, Lord Chaitanya was very strict. He even banished Junior Haridas, an important kirtan leader, for glancing lustfully at a woman. The Lord told him, "You are living with me in the renounced order, and yet you are looking at a woman with lust." Other devotees of the Lord had appealed to him to forgive Haridas, but he replied, "All of you can forgive him and live with him. I shall live alone." On the other hand, when the Lord learned that the wife of one of his householder devotees was pregnant, he asked that the baby be given a certain auspicious name. So while the Lord approved of householders having regulated sex, he was like a thunderbolt with those in the renounced order who tried to cheat by the method known as drinking water underwater while bathing on a fast day. In other words, he tolerated no hypocrisy among his followers. So today is also the disappearance day of Purushottam Das Thakur, who was one of these followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he was a householder. He had his father's name was Sadashiv Kaviraj, and his grandfather's name was Kamsari Sena. They're all great devotees of Lord Chaitanya. In fact, his father, Sadashiv Kaviraj, in Krishna Lila was Chandravali. It was like the head competition of Radharani and of the gopis in Vrindavan. And Kamsari Sen, his grandfather, in Krishna Lila was Ratnavali Sakhi, another one of the gopis. So Purushottam, he in Krishna Lila was known as Stoka Krishna, one of the 12 cowherd boys that came from the spiritual world with Lord Nityananda. And in his life, he didn't know anything but Lord Nityananda, service to Lord Nityananda. When he was small, his father noticed that he was always absorbed in the pastimes of Krishna. His play was playing out the pastimes of Krishna. And he had a son. His son's name was Kanu, who also was a great devotee of the Lord. When Purushottam's wife delivered Kanu, not long after that, she passed away. And Lord Nityananda personally took this boy, Kanu, and gave him to Janavi Mata, his Lord Nityananda's wife, Janavi Mata. And she kind of adopted that boy. Right? Later on, Lord Nityananda gave the son of Purushottam the name Sishu Krishna Das. Sishu Krishna Das. So Janavi Mata, she brought this boy to Vrindavan when he was about 5 or 6 years old. And whenever there was a kirtan, the boy used to dance very beautifully to the kirtan. And in Vrindavan, the Goswamis gave him the name Kanai Thakur, Kanai, and he was known as Kanai Thakur. A great devotee of Lord Chaitanya. So this devotee, Purushottam Das, who was one of the 12 cowherd boys, he later on had some disciples. And his disciples were named Madhva Acharya, not the Acharya from Udupi, another Madhva Acharya, and Yadava Acharya, and another disciple named Devaki Nandan Das. So Madhva Acharya later on married the daughter of Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda had a son and he had a daughter, and his son's name was Virabhadu and his daughter's name was Ganga Devi. So this Madhvacharya, disciple of Purushottam, he married Ganga Devi. And his other disciple, Devaki Nandan Das, he wrote a famous book called Vaishnava Vandana, in which he describes the glories of the different Vaishnavas connected to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So today is the disappearance day, and in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Srila Prabhupada quotes from the literature about Chaitanya Charitamrita of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in which he describes how to get to the place where the deities of Purushottam Das Thakur are still being maintained. Right? So you can refer to the Chaitanya Charitamrita to find out. And if you have the good fortune, you can have the darshan of the deities of Purushottam Thakur. So these associates of the Lord are all from the spiritual world and transcendental, and we, on their appearance days, we can pray to them so that we can understand their exalted lineage and their important relationship or sambandha with Lord Chaitanya and Lord Nityananda. So also today is the appearance day of Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivraj Akacharya Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the spiritual master of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. So he was born in Jagannath Puri. At that time, his father, Kedarnath Datta, gave him the name Bhimla Prasad Datta. Bhimla Prasad Datta. Because he was praying, I've never been inside the Jagannath temple. They don't let foreigners inside, right? Non-Hindus. But I've heard it described that there's one temple of Bhimla Devi, right? And isn't it that Jagannath Maha is, after he takes, they give it to Bhimla Devi right after that, isn't it? Right. I've never been inside, but I heard like that. So he prayed to that deity, Bhimla Devi, you send me one son who can spread this Krishna consciousness movement. Right? And after that, his wife became pregnant, and when the child was born, he called them Bhimla Prasad Datta. And it turned out that the Bhimla Devi and Lord Jagannath heard his prayers, because this boy was to do so much to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. And one of the emphasis that he had in terms of spreading Krishna consciousness that he also learned from his father, Kedarnath Datta, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is about book publishing, book printing, and book distribution. And this we see in the life of all the great acharyas. When Narottam Das Thakur was studying under Srila Jiva Goswami, many books were written, transcendental literatures. But in those days, they didn't have a printing press. They had to write everything on a palm leaf, right? And if you wanted a book, it would take a long time to write it, right? But the printing press came along, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur compared this printing press to the Brihat Mridanga. The Brihat Mridanga. In the Kirtan party, you can hear the Kirtan 1 block or 2 blocks away. You can hear the Mridanga. But if a book is printed, it can be heard all around the world. And Srila Prabhupada called book distribution literary kirtan. Literary kirtan. So when the devotees went out to sell books, they went out on Sankirtan. Our book department, headed up by Gokuleshwar Prabhu, right? And where Brahma Samhita and Tridam sit, is the Sankirtan department. So you would expect, okay, Sankirtan department, they must have hundreds of mridangas and cartels, but you won't find any. All you'll find are books, right? So how is it the Sankirtan department? Why? Because it's literary kirtan. The books are Shabda Brahman. They're actually transcendental sound vibration. And when they're distributed, they are the same as congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Right? So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he was very fond of book publishing and book printing and book distribution, and he told Srila Prabhupada that among his, ocean of other qualities. We could go on for days. And there's a book written by Bhaktivedanta Swami about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, 2 volumes about Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So he had so many wonderful qualities, and his history is so amazing. About the age of 7, he had the whole Bhagavad Gita memorized, and he was expert at Jyotish Shastras and so many things. But the outstanding thing that comes to my mind is how he imbibed into Srila Prabhupada this preaching mood, this mood to spread the Krishna consciousness movement. And it was manifest. He gave that in all his disciples, and he had many notable disciples and who were all engaged in preaching. And similarly, Srila Prabhupada, he was instructed in the very first meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that you preach this Krishna consciousness to the English-speaking people. Right? Very first time he met him, he met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at number 1 Ulta Danga. Okay? Ulta Danga. And today, they are also inaugurating that place where Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for the first time. See, Srila Prabhupada in his childhood, he was born in a Vaishnava family, and his father, Gaur Mohan Dey, used to regularly invite sadhus to the house and, give them lunch. And then after lunch, he would say, please bless my son that he becomes devotee of Radharani. Right? So Srila Prabhupada had seen many sadhus. And people respect sadhus, even though they may not be following so very carefully. So Prabhupada had seen many sadhus, and his friend said, let us meet this very special person. And he wasn't so much interested, but his friend drugged him there to that Ulta Danga. And on the roof of that building, Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he was arguing with him that, before we can effectively spread the message of Lord Chaitanya, we should have, India should become independent, right? That was his point, because at that time he was part of Gandhi's movement for independence. India should become independent. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur thirdly defeated his idea, right? And leaving that place, Ultadanga, Srila Prabhupada thought in his mind that the message of Lord Chaitanya is now in very confident hands. That was his impression. And he always took the instruction that he got there that night from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur to heart, to spread the message of Lord Chaitanya to the English-speaking peoples. Right? So that place was inaugurated today. The devotees were very fortunate to be able to acquire that Ulta Danga, and there's photographs where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is there with all of his devotees in front of that building in the kirtan party. They have mridangas and flags. So that now has become a very beautiful building. It was in a dilapidated condition, but they've renovated that. It's a very, very attractive place, and it's very historically important for our Krishna consciousness movement, because it's the place where Srila Prabhupada got the seed from his Guru Maharaj to spread this Krishna consciousness movement. He got the instruction, and therefore we're all sitting here in this class listening to the Chaitanya Charitamrita because of that meeting that took place in Ulta Ganga. When did it take place? 100 years ago, 1922. April 1922. April's just now coming, pretty soon, right? And now it is 2022, right? So almost 100 years ago that took place. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's causeless mercy, we have the opportunity to hear this Chaitanya Charitamrita that has come to us by the efforts of Srila Prabhupada, following the instructions of his guru, and we have an opportunity to hear the absolute truth. It's like we've been handed a rope. We're in the bottom of a very deep well. Right? If you're in a well, it's very difficult to get out of a well. But if somebody hands you a rope, then you can pull yourself out, right? So these literatures are there. They're like long ropes, and they're coming to us by the mercy of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. All we have to do is grab hold of the rope and pull ourselves out. Right? That means take advantage of hearing, reading, and discussing and trying to understand Srila Prabhupada's books in a proper way. And then we can get out of the deep well of material attraction, which is so strongly embedded in our conditioned hearts. Right? So this is a very auspicious day. We can take advantage of the instructions of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur that he imparted specifically to Srila Prabhupada. One time Srila Prabhupada was visiting Radha Kund. It was during Kartik, and at that time they were in Radha Kund, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was describing that there's a fire in the mud. And what he was referring to was that although they had made the Bagh Bazar Gaudiya Mutt, a big marble temple, the devotees were squabbling over who would get what room inside the mutt. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur at that time told Srila Prabhupada, it's better to sell the marble in the temple and print books. So from that, Srila Prabhupada could understand that his Guru Maharaj was very fond of books. And he told him that in Radha Kund, that if you ever get money, print books. Srila Prabhupada always kept that instruction, and whenever he got the opportunity, he would follow that instruction. First he printed the magazine, Back to Godhead magazine, to which he wrote all the articles, collected the money to buy the paper and print the magazine, and also he was distributing the magazine in tea stalls in Delhi. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was so fond of book distribution that when one of the devotees would go across the river from Mayapur to Navadvip and sell a few copies of the Gaudiya Mutt publications, he would glorify them in front of all the devotees. Right? He would glorify them. And so, in that mood, we should try to inculcate the instructions that are there in the books. We should try to follow those instructions that are there in the books, and we should try to distribute the books to other people. And if we do that, that will be the greatest glorification of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur and our beloved spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada. So on this day we pray for the Shakti to not be attracted by Maya, but to be attracted by the Lord, and specifically his Kali Yuga avatar, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is so merciful to the conditioned souls to give his mercy freely. And what is that mercy? so that people will be able to understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Okay? It's not an easy thing to understand the pastimes of Krishna with the gopis in Vrindavan. Many people will mistake it for mundane attraction of boys and girls in this material world, and they take things very cheaply. Although they're living in Vrindavan, you know, they're chanting Hare Krishna and having 3 girlfriends. You know, so this is, and even after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu left, there were many misconceptions that sprung up, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would call them Appa Sampradayas. They had got, and he would defeat them by his preaching and properly explaining what is the true path of the followers of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and not to become confused by misrepresentations of the philosophy. So Srila Prabhupada, especially in this Chaitanya Charitamrita, has carefully given the real path chalked out by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So as we go on reading this Chaitanya Charitamrita, we'll be able to understand properly what is the proper message and the proper process of this Krishna consciousness movement. So, are there any questions? Mike?
So we discuss that Maya entraps us and shackle is females. So when we were young, at age of 5 or 4, so we will not get attracted with females and anything, and we did not even know about that. But suddenly when our hormones get into peak, so we started getting attracted to other gender. So can you please enlighten us about that?
Well, we have the attraction there between male and female. That comes about because we're in this material body. This material body is a particular combination of the 3 modes of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Right? So at a certain stage, the body develops and these attractions happen. Now, the idea is that, you know, because we're conditioned souls, the attraction is there. And through the process of bhakti, or Krishna consciousness, we can overcome that attraction. We can understand that this attraction for the opposite sex is not our real nature, right? And our real nature is to be attracted by Krishna. So when we perform bhakti, the attraction for Krishna, it increases in our hearts. And when we, you know, are in the material world without hearing about Krishna, chanting Krishna's name, rendering service to Krishna, the attraction for the opposite sex increases within the heart. Our natural position is to be attracted by Krishna. It's like milk. But if you put something sour in the milk, it'll turn to yogurt or spoil, right? So that original attraction that we have for Krishna, due to this association with goodness, passion, and ignorance, has become converted, right? And by the process of Krishna consciousness, by chanting Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare we can come to our original and natural attraction for the beauty of Krishna. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is actually Radha and Krishna combined, Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Radha Krishna Nahayanya, to show how to do that. Right? Lord Krishna came himself and said, surrender unto me, sarva dharma prityaja. Surrender. That was 5,000 years ago. But the living entities didn't listen. Even today, so many people read Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita, this one, that Swami, this Swami, Chinmayananda Swami, all Swami, Bhagavad Gita. But none of them will say surrender to Krishna, right? Think of Krishna, be attracted by Krishna. Right? So today people, they didn't get the message. So Krishna came again 500 years ago to teach people how to surrender to Krishna. Although he's Krishna himself, he wanted to show how to surrender to Krishna. Even he took the renounced order of life, as Prabhupada mentioned. He had a young wife and a very loving mother, right? But he left just to show the people, to set the example. Right? And he taught Krishna Bhakti. So we need to follow that process that was given to us by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. If you look at the Guru Gauranga altar, that's who we have there. We have Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada. So by their mercy, we can overcome the shackles of attraction for the opposite sex. It's, for people and living entities in a male body, it's women. For living entities in a female body, it's men, It's the same thing. But neither are we male or female. We're all servants of, we're all female in a sense because we're Prakriti in relation to Krishna, who's the Supreme Purusha. We're meant to be enjoyed by Krishna. So how to do that? It's a process of Lord Chaitanya. How to get proper guidance? Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has given us Srila Prabhupada to get that proper guidance.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. When Srila Prabhupada was householder, he was very enthusiastic to serve Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement, especially serving his spiritual master's order. So before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's departure, 1 month before actually, so Prabhupada wrote a letter to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta saying that, Guru Maharaj, is there any specific service that you want me to perform? So right away Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada was very lucky. 1 month before his departure, he wrote such a serious letter to Srila Prabhupada saying that I want you to carry on Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission and spread Krishna consciousness. And this is where he has mentioned...
To the English-speaking peoples.
English-speaking people. This is where he has mentioned. And if you find money, print books and spread Krishna consciousness in English-speaking country. So he wrote that.
Well, that's an instruction that Srila Prabhupada always kept from that letter that he received just before Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left this world. But at that time he was still a householder.
Yeah.
He had young children.
Yeah.
And his idea was that he would become a very rich businessman and spread Krishna consciousness in that way.
Correct.
But, his spiritual master had a different idea. I can remember one devotee I met who was a disciple of Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj. Mm-hmm. So after Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur left, the Gaudiya Math kind of split up. There was a lot of dispute who was the Acharya, and they elected somebody as the Acharya, and so many things happened. So there were some devotees that got together, and they were trying to preach purely whatever they had learned from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada was accommodating them in his flat. And that was this Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj and Bhakti Pragyan Keshav Maharaj and one other sannyasi, Sridhar Maharaj. Sridhar Maharaj, yeah. Yes. So they were close to Srila Prabhupada. He was a householder, they were sannyasis, and they made a curtain down the flat. On one side Prabhupada was living with his family, and the other side they were going out in Calcutta and doing preaching. So Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, he had brought from his village one young boy. He was just 15 or young kid. So later on I met this, he was sannyasi at that time. His name was Tirtha Maharaj. He had taken initiation from Bhakti Vaibhav Puri and taken sannyas and all those things. So he was also living, he was like the servant of those sannyasis. Bring their food, wash their cloth and all those things, and they were going out and preaching. And he knew Prabhupada, but he was only a kid. Right? So he told me that many, many years later, they were talking about 1930s, or late 30s or early 40s or something, and Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj invited Prabhupada to bring his foreign disciples in 1971 to Rajamundry, where he had a mutt. That's the place where Ramananda Roy met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Correct.
So Prabhupada came and he brought his disciples, Achyutananda and Yashodananda and Guru Kripa, and they did a big kirtan, Dinanath, all these devotees right there in Rajamundry. So this Tirtha Maharaj, now he's older, much older, and he's a sannyasi, but he went to meet him. And Srila Prabhupada immediately recognized, oh, you were with us in my flat in Calcutta, and that he was shocked, because how could Prabhupada remember? Because his body was older, now he was a sannyasi, and then he was just a little kid. So he was completely amazed that Srila Prabhupada could remember him from those early days in Calcutta. But this is the, the Shakti of the Acharya. They have very powerful memories. There was another devotee. His name was Roy Chaudhary from New York City.
Sukumal Rai Chaudhary.
Sukumar Roy Chaudhary, but they called him Roy Chaudhary, Dr. Roy Chaudhary.
Professor.
He was a professor. He was actually a scientist.
Scientist and professor in Pace University.
Yeah, but at some point he worked for the city of New York.
Yes.
And he developed a biological entity that ate garbage, and he had a patent for that, and he made a lot of money. But he, when he was a young boy, he was from, Bangladesh, right? And his mother kept him in India, where he was going to school, because they had better schools or something. He's a young boy. And he lived in in a Gaudiya Mutt temple. His mother put him in a Gaudiya Mutt temple, and he was attending school. So he was young, just a kid, and living in the ashram. And Srila Prabhupada was also staying there with his godbrother in this ashram. I forget the Swami's name who was in charge of the ashram. But there was a new bhakta. They used to call him Bhakta. It was very rough, and he would fight with the devotees, and all the ashram inmates came to meet the Swami. I forget what his name is. And Prabhupada was sitting there. That time he was still wearing white. And they were all complaining about this new bhakta. He should be thrown out of the ashram. And this Roy Chaudhary was also, he was just a kid. He was sitting there listening to this going on. And he said that Srila Prabhupada got up and started to walk out. And the devotees were saying, oh, where are you going? Where are you going? And he said, listen, if we can't, by our example, keep this bhakta here and make him a devotee, then we should leave. So now I'm going. So
Right.
that was very, and then the devotees, they changed their mind about throwing out this new bhakta, right? So then, Roy Chaudhary went to America, he went to college, he became a professor, he was a scientist, he developed this biological thing that he patented. So many years passed. But he heard about the New York, there was going to be a Rath Yatra. So he went, and there he saw Srila Prabhupada. And he recognized that this was the same person that was in that ashram where I was a kid. So he wanted to meet him. So the devotees, after the Rath Yatra on 55th Street in New York, they brought this Roy Chaudhary to meet Srila Prabhupada. And as soon as he offered his pranams to Srila Prabhupada, as soon as he got up, Srila Prabhupada said, "Oh, I know you. You were in that place with," and the whole incident Prabhupada remembered. And then also it shocked Dr. Roy Chaudhary that how is it possible that he could still remember that after so many years. And by that time he had become much older, and there was just a little kid in a half pant and a t-shirt, and now he's a big professor. But Prabhupada remembered him.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
One little thing, can I? One little thing from your introduction about the impersonal idea of the common people in general. When Giriraj Swami, who was temple president over here, he's coming from very aristocratic and rich family. He was going to school in Boston, the Brandeis University, very prestigious school. And he was always thinking that he's going to become God. Become God. So, in fact, he mounted in a piece of granite right in front of his house, carving that I want to become God. This is what his idea was always, because he was brought up in gold spoon in his mouth. And when he met to Srila Prabhupada, same thing he asked, saying that I want to become God. Then Srila Prabhupada said, one does not become God. God is ever God. So then Giriraj Swami, Bhakta Glenn at that time, he surrendered to Srila Prabhupada and he came to India and he became devotee and he was here the temple president.
But before he came to India, he was in charge of the book distribution in Boston.
Boston, yes.
He was going out on book distribution.
Under my Guru Maharaj.
He was the Sankirtan leader. So he had become so enthusiastic as a preacher. One time he met this young man who was trying to sell him a book, but he was an impersonalist, and he was arguing that everything is one. Everything is one. I don't have to take this book because it's all one. And so Giriraj Swami preached to him, okay, if it's all one, then it doesn't matter if the money in your wallet is in your wallet or it's in mine, because it's all one. So that person was so proud, and Giriraj Swami had him cornered. He took all the money out of his wallet and he gave it to Giriraj Swami.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Srila Prabhupada Bhaktisiddhanta is so fond of book distribution that there is one disciple, Jati Shekhar Prabhu.
Who?
Jati Shekhar.
Okay.
Jati Shekhar.
Ah.
So he was distributing, they used to have a daily magazine, Kodi Patrika. So he was distributing door to door by walking. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta wrote to him saying that if you get 100 subscriptions, I will give you a cycle
Acha, to go by cycle.
Yeah, I will gift you a cycle. Then he worked so hard, then he got 200 subscriptions. then, then he gave him a imported bicycle. Like that. One more point I want to make is Srila Bhaktisiddhanta never thought so much about freedom movement.
Huh?
About freedom movement.
Ah.
He said it doesn't matter who rules the country as long as the rulers are giving us protection to the Gaudiya. So he preached to Subhash Chandra Bose because he was protesting that you are taking all young boys in your temple, give them to me, I will make them fight for India.
The Indian Republican Army.
Yeah. Then he preached to him saying that now you are saying you are Indian body, you are saying Britishers get out, because you are so much thinking about British. Next time you may take birth as a Britisher and harass Indians. Then he preached to him about I am not this body and all. Then Subhash Chandra Bose was so impressed that if I had come before this, I would have joined full time.
Prabhu, they have put in Scottish Church, they have put the outstanding students. Netaji Subhash Bose's name is there, and Srila Prabhupada's name is there.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Hanuman is behind you. Hanuman.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. So when was the disciples of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta were fighting, in his presence or after he leaving?
There was some bickering in his presence, but the wholesale, legal battles and things like that started after he left. Because there was one group that was authorized, and there was another group that artificially made someone the Acharya, and they began to dispute. Srila Prabhupada talks about that in one of his Vyas Puja offerings, and in Chaitanya Charitamrita later on we'll come to that, how that transpired. Any other question? Bhakti Vikas Swami's book that he put together after his interviews with Jati Shekhar. He used to go there in Orissa and meet that disciple of Bhakti Siddhanta, and used to tell him many stories about the time with Srila Bhakti Siddhanta. So he wrote that book after that, and you can learn a lot about the transcendental personality of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Very powerful, very, very powerful. They called it Singha Guru, lion Guru, because he wouldn't tolerate anything that was against the conclusion of the Goswamis in Vrindavan. Very powerful, right? And so you can read that book. It's very well. There's another book written by, what was his name? Rup Vilas, Prabhupada disciple. And it's just, smaller book, but it's also very, very nice about Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Those three books you can read. They're in the library, and I think we got more than one copy, so you can learn more about Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. We went to the Mayapur festival, and afterwards we went to Calcutta for a Pandal program that Srila Prabhupada was having in Calcutta. Not in Calcutta, in Hyderabad. From Calcutta we came to Hyderabad by train. So the whole bogie was filled with devotees, and in that train was Brahmananda Maharaj and Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Achyutananda, and I had the good fortune of having their association, and the devotees from Germany were in the train with Hansaduda, and I remember we stopped in Vijayawada or Vishakhapatnam, one of the two, and Bhakti Bhai Puri Maharaj got on the train, and he had these baskets of lemon rice. Vishakhapatnam, lemon rice, right? So we were riding the train, we had no food, but all of a sudden we had this nice lemon rice. So devotees were enjoying this prasadam. And he personally served out the devotees. And he knew, I could understand by the way they were talking that, he knew Brahmananda, he knew Chutananda, they were all like known to each other. And they were talking, and the train started. And I was a, new devotee and didn't ride much in trains, but the Maharaj didn't get off the train, but the train was going. And but there wasn't a problem because he had already arranged that somebody would pick him up at the next station. And I think probably that was at Visakhapatnam to Vijayawada. Something like that. But I remember when we went by Vijayawada, Chutananda said, there's a deity of Lord, maybe that was in Vishak, there's a Lord of Nishingadev on the hill, and he's covered in sandalwood paste all year long except for one day. And I was thought that, wow, that... Simhachalam, up on the hill. And I can remember, although we were sick and it was hot and all these things, but I thought it was very amazing that there's so many things to see and do in India, But that was the first time I met Bhakti Vaibhav Puri Maharaj, very humble devotee of the Lord. And then we went to Hyderabad, and in Hyderabad, Srila Prabhupada did a Pandal program in one Maidan. There was 10,000 people coming every day, and I remember at the end of the programs, the crowd would lunge to try to touch Srila Prabhupada's feet, thousands of people. So the sannyasis would make a line, and they would hold each other's dandas to hold back the crowd so Srila Prabhupada could get to his car, And then we took a train from Hyderabad to Vrindavan, because on Ram Navami there was going to be the opening of the Krishna Balaram Mandir. Shri Krishna Balaram Mandir ki jai. So again, we got in the train, and there were many devotees, Western devotees there, and the bogie was completely filled with devotees. But I saw this one older, we were all in our 20s, but this person must have been 35 or 40 or something, and he was sitting in by the bathroom on his suitcase, right? He had saffron kapra, but nobody seemed to talk to him, and he didn't talk to anybody, and I thought maybe this is just some sadhu that got in the train, is, going to go to Vrindavan. But later on, in Vrindavan, there was an initiation ceremony, and the initiation ceremony was for all those devotees who had gotten first, but hadn't gotten second. So I was getting my second initiation. I was in that initiation ceremony. But in the initiation ceremony, I saw this same devotee that was in the train was also sitting in the initiation ceremony. And the devotee said, I asked, who's that? And they said, that's Gaur Govinda, and he's going to take sannyas today. So my impression was that this is a very humble devotee. Here he is, ISKCON, taking sannyas, but he's riding in the train, sitting on his suitcase next to the bathroom. He's a very humble person. And so that was my first, at that same initiation, Tripurari Prabhu, he got sannyas, Tripurari Maharaj. Actually, there was a moratorium on sannyas because some sannyasis had given up their vows of sannyas and had left. So Prabhupada said, no more sannyas. But he made an exception for Gaur Govinda Maharaj, that he could take sannyas. And at the same time they asked him, can Tripurari take sannyas? And Prabhupada said, yes, he can take sannyas. So then they said, when can he take sannyas? And he said, he can take with Gaur Govinda Maharaj tomorrow, he can take sannyas. Then another experience I had with Gaur Govinda Maharaj, I was traveling with three devotees, Abhinandan, Anutama, and Gajahanta. And, huh? They're all my friends. Well, good for you. So we went to Dwarka, and wherever we went, we had two trunks filled with books. So we were selling books. Went to Dwarka, we went to Vrindavan, and one of the places we went was Bhubaneswar. Right? So there we met Gaur Govinda Maharaj. And when we got down from the train, we tried to get a rickshaw to take us to that place where the temple was. But none of the rickshawwalas wanted to take us, because it's so far away that we won't get a ride to come back. So we had to really pay a lot of extra money to some rickshawwalas to take us out there, like double the fare, because they wouldn't get a ride to come back. And when we went there, it was just open fields, and there were two huts. One, Gaur Govinda Maharaj was living in one hut, and in the other hut was where Srila Prabhupada lived when he came to visit him. Right? So that was my second meeting of Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and I can understand that he was very, very humble person. But not only that, he was very learned in the Shastras. He could speak for hours, like they do in the Gaudiya Math, for hours, all based on Shastra. And when my third experience with him was, they had printed the Oriya Bhagavad Gita, but they were just sitting in the warehouse. No one was distributing them. So one devotee that was working with Gaur Govinda Maharaj at the time, Gaur Govinda Maharaj was translating the books from English to Oriya, and Tejas Prabhu was getting them printed. So Tejas used to invite me and to come and distribute the books. So we took the Jagannath bus and we drove from Bombay all the way to Bhubaneswar. And there we met Gaur Govinda Maharaj, and he encouraged us to take these Oriya Bhagavad Gitas and to distribute them. So with me was a devotee named Sadhana Siddha, who knows Oriya. Were you there, Hanuman? Okay, Hanuman was there. And another devotee who joined us at the time, his name was Tatpar, the Prabhupada disciple from Bengal, who later on took sannyas, Tatpar Swami. And so we traveled all over Orissa for the first time distributing the Oriya Bhagavad Gita. And Gaur Govinda Maharaj was very happy that we distributed a couple thousand Oriya Bhagavad Gitas in Orissa. And those were my three experiences with Maharaj. And he left from this world on the appearance day, this very same day, of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And just the morning before, he had given a class about Lord Jagannath and Madhurya Bhav, very elevated subject. And in that evening, he felt some pain in his heart, and he left this world. Back home, back to Godhead. Gaur Govinda Maharaj ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Purushottam Das Thakur ki jai. Nitai Gaur Premanandi.